Tonight is August 27, 2019. We're still in volume 2 of Tzuvim Rabbanon. We're on page 185. We're dealing with women and their approach to the study of Gemara, Torah Sheba'al Peh. The last mimer here is the mimer of Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, who supported encouraging women to study Gemara as part of the standard curriculum. And he bases it even on more fundamental grounds than what was ascribed to his father-in-law, Rav Soloveitchik, and we should learn it. It says, L'da'ati ratzui v'tzorich, lo rak efshar. He says it's not just possible to teach women, but it's necessary and desirable. Latet chinuch intensivi, right? An intensive education lebanot, gam im korot Torah Sheba'al Peh, to include sources of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Bein im mishum atane shenoshim oskos b'chol hamiktza'os. Today we know women are neurosurgeons, they're engineers, they're very educated so they can handle the material. Why should their level of education be less in Torah than it is in all the other professions? So that's one side to not really understand why they shouldn't learn Torah Sheba'al Peh. And remember, we learned the Chofetz Chaim last week when they established the Beis Yaakov movement. He supported the concept that they should learn. Shema Rambam Omer shetzarich l'mod lager is ikari adas. According to the Rambam, that you have to teach a convert the yesodos of the religion. Adam shegadol b'mizkeres yudid. Alachas kama v'kama habanot kayom mekabelet chinuch klalei racha. That a woman should also be taught the same breadth and width of Jewish education. Rabot magios l'universita. Many women go to university. V'sham v'lo rak sham, ela b'chevra b'chlal. In general society, women are much more educated than they were before. They come with various different viewpoints of the world. So knowledge of Torah is certainly appropriate to a girl. He accepts fully remember, we learned the Beis HaLevi last week that a woman has to learn the various aspects of Torah that apply to her. And the dati ma shedorish lebat k'dei lekabel es ha'hachshara toranit ha'masid. The practical knowledge that a woman needs today to do the things she has to do, zeharbei ma'avar l'mashem l'amdim hayom. So they require much more education than what is really being taught to women today.
Yeah, but you see, we're forgetting one thing which is most important and should have just, no one brings it up, but I mentioned last week. What happens is it destroys the marriage. It'll destroy a marriage. If you allow a woman to learn Gemara, she has a lot of the free time. He doesn't. He's working.
She'll become more learned than him.
She's going to become more learned than him, and it causes conflict.
So you want to say for shalom bayis reasons?
Exactly. That's what I always thought it was. That's
Okay.
why you didn't teach the women.
No.
That's why you don't allow women to read the Torah. So, in shul.
That's the reason why?
Yeah.
Well, covered at Sibur. Depends how you define that.
Ovadia said that covered at Sibur is because if they're going to do it, they're going to do it better than the men.
So that's Jerry Svara.
Instead, the men will sit learn all day, and the women will go to work and have children and take care of the home.
Which occurs in many places in Israel
and that,
today.
of course, is good for shalom bayis, right?
So let's just complete Rav Lichtenstein.
Perfect, yeah.
Yesh lagvir talim
And I
lebanot.
think that's
He's-
what he mentioned about,
No, we haven't. No,
Soloveitchik,
he didn't say
mentioned
that.
also about davening, allowing women to daven in the shul. What would happen if you allow a chazan to be a woman?
No, he didn't. We haven't addressed. We haven't heard Rav Soloveitchik on that issue.
Chazan, a woman, Chazan, it's a different thing because she's not mechuyev.
She can't be Yotze the men because she has different chiyuvim regarding. You can only be a shliach tzibur has to be motzi people who don't know how to daven. So if you're not on the same chiyuv level, you can't be motzi the other person. Okay. So yesh lagbir talimud lebanot kamutit ve'echutit. He says we have to strengthen what we teach them both in amount and in quality. Toch kedei horas kol tchumei Torah, so that they can understand the way halacha is paskined in all realms of Torah. V'chol zot adayin lo nachrog min hamizgeret hanal. He says we still won't be violating the general outline he's given. Ein li shum hinagdut limot benot Gemara. So Rav Lichten says very clearly he's not opposed to them studying Gemara. Ani gam lo mishuchna shratzui l'chotz al bat limot Gemara. He doesn't think that we should force them. B'tzur kalkach intensive. You don't have to. If a woman is not sort of moishech herself to come to that, it doesn't have to be forced to do that. Jerry, this addresses what you want to say a little bit. He says there's still going to be a difference between men and women. The responsibilities are different in men and women. Right? One makes the parnasa, one maybe has to study Torah through the chiyuv. But if we're dealing with the concept of are women capable of studying a blood Gemara, ulahavinoto, to understand it, ulehenot mimenu, and to enjoy it, eini roya shum siba shlo lechavin lekach lamitzot levana. He sees no difference. V'tzarch afilu lemaset et ze kechelek integrali shel lemida bebeis hasefer. He says that this should be instituted as a fundamental part of the curriculum. Shiur mamashi. Kach ani melamed es biti. He says that's how he educated his daughters. V'kach choncha ishti says his wife was educated. His wife was Rav Soloveitchik's daughter. V'zunirit liaderecha mitzumalam l'tzibur abanot b'doreinu. He says that's the way it should go in our generation. So Rav Lichtenstein accepts the approach of the Chofetz Chaim that modernity requires women be taught Torah, but opposed to the Chofetz Chaim, who felt this was justified only due to pressing circumstances. Rav Lichtenstein feels that this is included as well within the earlier guidelines of the Beis HaLevi, that women must study Torah subjects that are relevant to them. Just that in today's world, the entire gamut of Torah, including Gemara, taught at the highest levels, is relevant for developing a true understanding and commitment to Judaism and serving as future leaders of the community. In summary, it seems that although within the sources there is good reason for women not to study Torah, we have seen that for a number of reasons today it is generally accepted to allow it more than it was practiced in earlier periods of history, though there are significant differences between communities today with regard to what subjects are taught and the style of how they are taught.
Now, when you talk about Torah, are you equating it to Gemara, or Torah means Nach and all that?
We went through.
I know, I understand,
Yeah.
but in
Rav
relation to
Lichtenstein
women,
ended up saying he thinks it's important to teach women Gemara. But you can see that we had different poskim
yeah, because
who
I mean,
felt
women
different.
learn Nach and all that very well, but not too many are involved in the Gemara.
Today
properly.
they are. Today they
Yeah,
are. In
not-
many
not
schools.
every place.
Not every place, but in many schools they are. And then they have no problem with studying it. Okay. What about the...
Footnote 16 is interesting.
It is also worthwhile to note that the position of Rav Chaim David HaLevi in Aselech Harav, who first posits that the injunction not to teach women Torah does not apply to adults, similar to the position of the Mayan Ganim, means he says that the prohibition of teaching women Torah, that's when they were children. But it didn't apply to when they were adults, because their minds are not problematic where they're going to make it tiflus, like we said last week. However, he then...
Tiflus is only for little kids.
That's the way he learns.
You know,
That's the way this Rav Chaim David HaLevi.
Chaim David HaLevi was the chief Sephardi rabbi of Tel Aviv for many years. He wrote a book,
Aselech Harav.
The famous halacha book is Mekor Chaim, very famous posek in Israel.
However, he then presents a broader argument that the entire principle of not teaching women Torah should not apply in our times. He explains that it is based upon the assumption that women never studied any academic subjects, and concern therefore existed that exposure to Torah, which is the pinnacle of all wisdom, would cause them harm. However, today, when women regularly study many other secular subjects as well without difficulty, there's no reason why Torah study should be any worse. That's it's basically what Rav Lichtenstein said. No
Very
difference.
interesting. So if you speak to people of, Haredi, people that are very, people who interpret the Gemara in a much more literal sense, right? They'll say, look, the Gemara says, it's very clear the Gemara says they shouldn't teach them, it's also right? As opposed to what he's saying, the Gemara was basically not giving you a psak halacha like dorai. So it was like they're arguing the Gemara was an opinion from those days. At that time, that was what was applicable.
That's how he's learning. He's learning a pshat in the Gemara, exactly
The
like
danger,
that.
of course, is a slippery slope. That where you can start interpreting a lot of different halachas that way, or halachas.
You know, there is a Tosfos in Brachas that talks about, women benching, being motzi the husband and benching, and vie on such a husband who does. And in that Tosfos, it seems that women in general were not taught how to read. See, the level, the Tosfos is 1,000 years ago. The Gemara is 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So already 1,000 years ago, the level of education for women was extremely low. So we have to recognize that the mitzias of things today are completely different. Half of all medical school classes are women, all the universities, etc. So I think Rav Chaim Dor Levi said it very, very clearly that they're, from an intellectual standpoint, they certainly can handle this material today. As it may have been different because if you don't have any kind of basic education, you're not going to be able to handle it. But women today are different.
They were a part of the Hakel.
They were part. Nashim v'taf came. Yeah, but even taf. So Rashi there asks the question: why bring the taf? We're talking about a 2-year-old child. La vischar lemeviyayim. So there's no raya that they came because they knew something. Because you see, even the taf was brought, even though they didn't know something.
Means, so the taf you bring in.
Lemeviyashar lemeviyayim.
So why you bring the woman? Why you bring the woman?
No, but I'm saying you wanted to use that as a raya that they have a connection to Torah.
It's a raya that they need to be taught Torah, because what is a hakel? The purpose of the hakel is to
Right, but
teach
it
the
doesn't
Torah.
help us regarding their intellectual capacity issue, because you have the taf to say, well, the taf were
So
brought.
the taf, Rashi has a hard time to understand.
But why the taf?
Why to bring the taf? Why to bring the woman if she's not in the parsha?
So the same reason why the taf was brought.
No, Rashi doesn't ask about the taf, about the woman.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
Rashi
Oh, so you
would
want to
ask-
be medayik from Rashi that they had even the intellectual ability then.
Yeah.
Maybe
Okay.
you had to do something.
Okay, that's a nice diuk.
Maybe you could have to do something with Pirsum. Pirsum.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Hakel, it comes in a
It's
different
something
madrig.
different, yeah.
Okay. Final mitzvah regarding Limud Torah is the Indian of writing a Sefer Torah, because it's closely related to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. It says in Devarim, it says Vatak kisvu lachem es ashira zos. There, it's referring to Shiras Hazinu. V'lamdas bnei Yisrael sima b'fiyem. Teach it to bnei Yisrael, put it in their mouths. It says, write this shira. Laman tia li ashira zos leid b'nei Yisrael. So this pasuk could be interpreted as referring solely to the command of Hashem to Moshe to record the song of Parshas Hazinu, which appears immediately thereafter in the Torah. But Chazal interpreted it as referring to the mitzvah for every Jew to write a Sefer Torah.
Well, maybe the Shira is talking Shira. Which Shira are we
No.
talking about?
This is by Hazinu, right before says Parshas
That's the
Hazinu.
Shira, that's
In
the Shira.
Vayelech, this pasuk comes in. Yes, Hazinu is written as a shira, Ariach al Gabi Levena. It's written in a shira form. Hazinu is a shira. So says in Masechta Sanhedrin, Amarava, Afal Pishini Chula voice of La'adam Sefer Torah. Let's say you were inherited from your father a Sefer Torah. Mitzvah lichtov mishalom. There's a special mitzvah, you got to write your own. Shneimar ve'atak kisva lachem es hashira. And the Sefer Achinuch, the Rishon, gives a svara. Misharshi mitzvah. What is the root of this mitzvah? Lefish yadu b'vnei adam she'moisim kol divrei lefi hachana nimtzas lehem. People do things based on their preparation prior to when they do something. Val Kain, tzivanu baruch hu liyot lekol echad ve'echad b'nei Yisrael sefer Torah muchan etzlo. It is for this reason that Hashem wants us each to have a sefer Torah with us. Sheyuchal likros bo tamid. We should be able to read it all the time. Gentlemen, we are talking in an era before the printing press, right?
Yeah.
The Gutenberg is 1452. We're talking about the thousands of years before. There were no chumashim, there were no svarim. So you wanted to learn, so you had to have your own sefer.
There are two things here. The Gemara said, even if you have a Sefer Torah from your fathers,
You have to write another
you
one.
still have to write another. And also, when you see what the Chinuch said, Lefi Achana שידעו שבעצם הדברי לפי ההכנה שהנמצא להם. So you have to write a Sefer Torah. It's not enough that you have a Sefer Torah already in your home. It's not about being accessible. It's about doing something.
But the chinuch seems to be going like this. The chinuch seems to be saying, whatever a person does, there always has to be preparation prior to what he does. And they want to make sure you have a kasha, because if you've received it, we want to make sure that he has the proper Torah to be ma'ayin in it, which is part of the hachana before whatever he's going to do. He's going to shake the lulav, he's going to bring a sukkah, etc., etc. So you ask the kasha, why would there be a mitzvah to write it if you inherited it?
Yeah, but
So we'll have to see what the chinuch says about that.
I'm answering that the chinuch has always through his book. It's almost like a
Methodology, right? Misharsha mitzvah is by everything.
That you have to do something in order that your heart will be there.
Correct.
And this is a part of that.
But he notices.
Write the Sefer Torah. It's not just about being accessible to Sefer Torah. If you yourself write the Sefer Torah, you're going to be nimshach achrei what you write, because it's a message.
I would say that he hasn't. I would say he hasn't said that yet. Maybe he's going to say it, but he hasn't said it yet. Right now, all he said is the reason we want him to write a Sefer Torah, sheyuchal likros bo tamid, v'lo yitzarach lechas achrav lebeis chaveru leman yilmed liyiras Hashem. So right now it seems like it's a hechatimsa for him to be able to look, to know what he has to do. He has to be familiar with the mitzvahs. So now he's going to answer Nati's shaila. He has a Sefer Torah from his father. Leman yirbu asforim beinenu. So he doesn't give the answer of what that. He's saying, you know what? Write another one, so there's going to be another Torah in the world. So somebody else will have it. Or to be marbis for him. V'nuchal hashil mehem. He can loan it out. Lasher lo tasig yada liknos. So v'gam leman yikru b'sforim chadoshim kol echad v'echad b'Yisrael. We also want people to be able to read Sifrei Torah that are written new, because we know time goes on. It's harder to read Sifrei Torah that are old. They get smudged. They get faded. So we need new schoira. Pentakutz nafshan b'karm. They're going to break their heads trying to read it. B'sfarma yishanim shenich lamavoyseim. This is v'dabani. She'afal pi she'ikra chiv d'oraisa ein rak b'sefer ha'Torah. Ein safek shegam b'sharas form shnischaber al perush ha'Torah yesh l'kol echad lasos mem k'fei ha'yicholos ben ha'tamim she'amarnu. So he says, even in remember, the Sefer Chinuch lived 1200, 1300. There's already, Rashi's already written. Now, they didn't have it in book form, but they certainly had it in handwritten manuscript form. And many other form, Rav Hai Gaon, they had Sidurim. So he's saying there's going to be a chiyuv to write those things as well. They did it by copying, like the monks, Lahavdil in the Abbey. That's what they did all the time. They copied manuscripts. That's why we have Aristotle and Plato, because especially after anyways, they copied manuscripts. And the Chinuch is telling us we should do the same thing with our Sforim. And even though we've all inherited from our ancestors, we are a people of the book, we need to keep on writing books. So they would create in their home like a library, and they would invite Sofrim to come. So obviously, it was a person of means to be able to hire a sofer, to be able to write a Sefer Torah. So the Shulchan Aruch codifies it based on the language of the Gemara, applying the mitzvah even when one already owns a Sefer Torah. Says Shulchan Aruch in Yoredeya, mitzvah saseh kol ish miYisrael lichtov lo Sefer Torah. Afilu yinichlo a voice of Sefer Torah. Mitzvah lichtov mishalo. Exactly the words of the Talmud Bavli. So the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch both formulate the mitzvahs writing a Sefer Torah. If so, would one fulfill the mitzvah when purchasing a Sefer Torah? So, is it enough? I can't write it, but I can buy one. Am I fulfilling the mitzvah of Ksivas Sefer Torah by purchasing it? And if not, what does one do who cannot write one himself? Like what Jerry just asked. So the Gemara in Menachos explains that one who purchases a Sefer Torah is considered to be on a lower level than one who writes one, but he has fulfilled the mitzvah. Okay? On Rav Yeshua Barava,
difficult.
says Masechta Menachos, Daf Lamed, on Rav Gidel Amarav, Halokech Sefer Torah Ashuk. You buy Sefer Torah, Kechoitev mitzvah not min Ashuk. You got a mitzvah, but it's like you kidnapped it. Kosfu Malal Kosfu Keilu Kiblu Mar Sinai. However, if you write one, it's as if you received the Torah directly from Har Sinai. So there's a hierarchy. If you can write one yourself, it's on a higher level. Says Rashi, Kechoitev mitzvah, but u mitzvah avad. Rashi says very clear that there's a hierarchy. It's better if you write it yourself. Now the Ramah limits. The Ramah is going to comment that what the Shulchan Aruch said. The Ramah limits Rashi's claim that one has fulfilled the mitzvah when purchasing a Sefer Torah to a case where he wrote or corrected some of it himself. So of course, the minig has occurred in Klal Yisrael that even when you buy a Sefer Torah, they leave some over, so that few letters can be added, so that they want the person to contribute to the writing of it. You're going to have more of a shaychus in the mitzvah. But if he did not participate in the writing at all, he has not fulfilled the mitzvah according to the Ramah. Let's see the Ramah himself. Sachar lo yisar for lichtov lo sefer Torah. You hired a sofer to spend a year writing a Sefer Torah. I don't know what the cost is, 20,000, 40,000. It changes, but that's about what a Sefer Torah costs. V'hu hayamuteh v'higiu, he fixed it, or he wrote some letters. Harezeki ilukosvo. So with this gather, the Ramah says it's as if you wrote it. Avalakacho kach. But if he bought a finished Sefer Torah, v'lo higia b'dor, he didn't add anything to it. Havi kechoitev mitzvah nashruk ve'ene yotze b'zeh. So it's not like Rashi, look back, it's not like Rashi explained Masechta. The words in Masechta Menachos was Ki'il Choitev Ben Ashuk. How did Rashi explain? But umitzvah avad. The Ramahs argue with Rashi here. He's saying no, it's you Choitev Ben Ashuk and you're not Yotze at all if you didn't add something to it. Now the Gra rules, he agrees with Rashi that one has indeed fulfilled the mitzvah by purchasing Torah even if you didn't add anything. So we have a machlokes. Ramah and the Gra. It's a grab.
Choitev mitzvah, it's a sugya.
Right, like it's you have a mitzvah. I grab it in front of you.
Yeah, so it's I think it's a sugya, and you have.
Yeah, but here they're using a different.
No, you have to pick
to somebody else.
To somebody else, but you still fulfill the mitzvah.
Yeah, you
Still
do.
fulfill the mitzvah.
That's like the way Rashi learns.
That's the way Rashi
Rashi learns.
Yeah, because the terminology choitev mitzvah
Is because you did you makayim the mitzvah. It's just you might owe the guy asara zehuvim there.
Yeah, that's the
right.
that you have to pay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the Biur Gra in the same sugya? The same sugya, ayin reish. If you notice, Yoredeya siman reish ayin. They don't call it siman reish ayin because it's ra, so they call it siman ayin reish, right? Because we don't want to say it's siman ra, right? So the Biur Gra there says ayin Rashi sham, dibra maskal choitev mitzvah avid, v'divrei Rashi ikar. It's phenomenal that you see what's going on here. That
Probably because of what we said.
maybe.
You know the guys in the country,
Right.
and he knows the whole shas, and he knows the choitev mitzvah
Right.
means that you.
So we have to look over there because sometimes the Gra will write ayin boo 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 boo.
Yeah.
So if in the Gra there he said ayin the sugya choitev mitzvah, you'd have a very good raya. Now
I understand why they said you should write it. You know what I mean? As opposed
because
to
the Torah says it.
No,
Ve'ata kisvu
otherwise
lachem.
you would only have wealthy people that are going to be able to afford. The most common people cannot afford a
Okay.
Sefer Torah.
But the
So
Rashi.
therefore, but if you write it yourself,
Okay.
you're
But,
able to afford
but
it.
the Ramah has now said that you can hire it, you can buy it, but you have to write a little bit and then you're
Right,
makayim the mitzvah.
exactly.
So you're saying, what about the people who can't? They have to learn how to write the Sefer
You know how
Torah.
to write the thing. I mean, that's why they don't want just use buying a Sefer Torah and put it away. That means only the wealthy people are going to have the Sefer Torahs, and that's it. The
So-
poor people will never be able to afford one.
So
So by you contributing
let's-
no handwriting to something, that's okay.
Let's learn the Sridei Eish. Now, the Sridei Eish, Rav Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg, passed away in 1966. There was a very good biography I would highly recommend, written by Professor Mark Shapiro on the Sridei Eish. The Sridei Eish learned in Slobodka. He was a major posek in Germany during the period of the Nazis. He dealt a lot with the problems of shchita. The Nazis tried to limit shchita with stunning. That's one of the major tshuvas that he wrote about. He was matir at that time. And then the Sridei Eish, there's a famous tshuva about bas mitzvah that, I think he wrote it in the 1950s, where there's the big debate between the Igros Moshe and the Sridei Eish. He felt that for psychological reasons, you should support having a bas mitzvah celebration. Igros Moshe said you shouldn't do it in a hall, you should do it in a private home, and we'll get to that. There's going to be a sugya in that. But I wanted to just lay the ground of who the Sridei Eish was. When they buried the Sridei Eish, he wrote tshuvas about Bnei Akiva, where he supported the concept as long as it was supervised to have boys and girls in a mixed program, but as long as there was supervision. So the Sridei Eish,
The tshuva was about the singing, Shalashudas.
and just in general about a mixed
Singing,
group.
Kol Isha, that was the main tshuva. The main tshuva was they asked him because they were concerned.
Yeah, but the Trei Kol Olam Mishtami used.
how we can do a Shalashudas together because we want to sing together. If we're allowed to sing together, if you're allowed to hear a girl singing, and he said that it's Trei Kol
Right,
Olam Mishtami.
but the major thrust of that tshuva deals in general. Do we support this like Ezra and Bnei Akiva, which had mixed groups? So the Sridei Eish. Now, so in 1960, when he passed away, there was mamish a fight at the Kvura. That means the Mizrahi wanted to bury the Sridei Eish by them, and the Haredi community took, and he's buried like by Harmanuchos, by Rav Moy. You understand? Because the Haredi community also viewed the Sridei Eish as a major Gadol Ador posek. So it's a very interesting biography by Mark Shapiro. I would really recommend it. Says the Sridei Eish. By the way, he lived in Switzerland after the war, after World War II. Yeah, he lived in Switzerland. And then eventually, when they buried him...
I thought the Haredi were against him. Was
Say
it for a
again?
long period of time?
No, no. Well, at the
He
end,
was liberal. I mean, they thought he was a little bit more liberal.
liberal.
than
Yeah,
everybody
he
else.
also corresponded. Their famous correspondence between the Sridei Eish and people who eventually, big dolim in Slobodka, who ended up in America at the Jewish Theological Seminary, like Saul Lieberman, Goine Oilam. But to make a parnasa, they remained shomer Torah mitzvahs, but they worked in Jewish Theological Seminary, or they were rabbonim and conservative rabbis. There's major letters that go back and forth between the Sridei Eish. So yes, there was controversy with the Sridei Eish because he was certainly what we would call more liberal in terms of his approach to bas mitzvah and all these other things, and Bnei Akiva. But even at the end of his life, the Haredim took him back into the fold. V'ulam haramo b'Yeredeya, simin ar kosav, shem koden sefer Torah v'lo higia bo kosav ha'v'chakotiv mitzvah nashuk ve'eni yotze b'zeh. So the Sridei Eish is quoting the Ramo, what we just learned, that said that if you don't write something in the Sefer Torah, you're not yotze. Kavanoso, sheni yotze yidei kiyu mitzvahs ksiva Sefer Torah yidei kniya, v'rak al yidei ksiva hu yotze. You got to do at least some ksiva. By just buying a complete Sefer Torah, you were not makayim the mitzvah. V'nireh. Shadaitu Gedas HaChinuch b'mitzvah Taryag, right? Because this is the last mitzvah. It's the 613th mitzvah. Shetama mitzvah shel ksiva Sefer Torah hu laman yirbu asforim beineim. He's reminding us that the Chinuch said that the reason for this mitzvah is so that we will have more sforim. V'nuchal hashil mehem l'asher lo tasig yado liknos. We'll be able to loan these sforim out to people who don't have to buy. V'gam lo an yikru b'sforim chadoshim kol echad v'echad b'Yisrael. So we should read in new books, Pentokot Stav Shabbakom Yisroel Yisroel Shenichlam Avoisem, where he's quoting the Chinuch. Umitam Zeni Yotze Mishakonim Nashuk, Kivan Shlo Hir Bas from Yisrael. Oh, he wants to say like this: if you're just buying a Torah that's already there, you're not adding to the new Sfarim, like the Chinuch said. You're just changing hands. It's going from one person to another person.
Commission?
No. So that's. But he said Koinim and Ashuk, implying there's a Sefer
No, but
Torah.
the Rama said Sochar lo Sofer. He commissioned. There is a problem with the Sridei Eish. I don't understand it.
No, but because.
The Rama said Sochar lo Sofer. He hired, he commissioned somebody to write.
But the
Sefer Torah.
Gemara says
That's
Halokeach Sefer Torah min Ashuk.
The Gemara said Halokeach Sefer Torah, but the Rama
Okay,
didn't say Halokeach
okay,
Sefer Torah min Ashuk.
okay,
The
but
Rama
he has a
said
but
Sochar lo Sofer. He
that's
commissioned
that's
Sofer.
that he wouldn't have a problem. He
So
has
why he said Nira Shadai Kedat Achim?
no. So he because the Chinuch also talked about Laman Yirbu Asforim that even though You got it from your forefathers. There's a mitzvah to do it again. Lo tasi gadol liknot. No, so all the Sri Dayesh is saying is if you buy a Sefer Torah that's already been written,
there is a
not that
mistake.
you
There is a mistake.
hired it.
There is a mistake. She'in kona sefer Torah. It's not kona. Sochar lo sofer. That's the Ramah.
Sarcha Soifer is there would be no problem the way the Sri Dayesh is learning, because you're adding now. But if you have a finished Sefer Torah that's already been written, you just buy it. You're just changing hands. It's going from place A to place B. You haven't added a new Sefer Torah. So Hanami, he would agree with you that if he hired a Soifer, he wouldn't have a problem. He's talking about, let's say, an old shul closed down, and there's a Sefer Torah, and you have an opportunity to buy it. You didn't add a new Sefer. So for that side of the Chinuch gave us two svaras. You need a Sefer to learn from, and you need to add. What Marami is saying is if you just buy another written Sefer Torah already, you haven't added any new svar. Ulam, haskamas aposkim hi, delo kaharama. So the Sri Dayesh wants to say, based on the Gra that we quoted, that we don't paskin like the Ramah. Ela sheyotze mitzvah sor gam b'kniya. Even if you didn't add one line to it, you're still yotze the mitzvah. V'chein echriya Gra b'yoredeya, simen aniskar le'el karashi. Sheyotze gam b'kniya sefer Torah l'fizer shapi yeshlom et sheyotze gam b'kabbalas matana. Let's say somebody gives you a gift.
They have a problem here with the Hebrew and the English. They should say that Ulam dat Ramah b'yoredeh simen katav shimsoch lo sofer lichtov lo sefer Torah.
You're saying they didn't quote the Ramah properly.
We should tell.
Yeah, but but that's the Sri Dayesh. According to the Sri Dayesh.
No, it's not. It's not the Sudesh. It's the Tzurva. The quote is later.
But I'm reading in Hebrew.
No,
I didn't
no.
read the English.
The quote is in the second.
Shetama mitzvah shel ksiv sefer Torah who quote
Ve'ulam.
Lamad Yirbu Asforim
First line. Ve'ulam haramah
Yeah.
be'yodeh. This is the Tzurva.
Shem Kona sefer Torah.
This
He-
is the Tzurva.
Yeah, but maybe there's more Ramah that we didn't read. Maybe they
let's go
didn't.
look.
Maybe they didn't bring the whole
You
Ramah.
said sochar lo sefer.
No, but there may be more
More
Ramah.
in the Simon.
See, Nati, they don't always bring the whole Ramah. There could be few lines of Ramah before that they didn't quote. We'd have to look inside the Yordei itself to see, because it may be there.
When someone donates a Sefer Torah, they invite people to come in and put the little.
Because they want to be Makayim L'chol HaDeis.
How are the
What do you
no?
mean
But the
kind of-
guest,
He
he
doesn't
didn't.
We
buy
just
it.
said
He gets in.
the-
He has in his house. He has.
the
He
halach-
invites everybody.
I'm going to
What
explain.
did you accomplish?
The
by
halacha
me doing
psuk,
it?
the halacha psuka that we just said is that even if you bought a completely finished Sefer Torah, you yourself were makayim the mitzvah of ksiva Sefer Torah. However, according to the Ramah, you don't unless you add some writing. So a person who buys a Sefer Torah, he spent 40 grand. We want to make sure that he's makayim the mitzvah.
So him.
So you're right. Not only that, but other people who come, in a sense, they're also chapping into the mitzvah as well.
So
Because
therefore,
even
I've
though
already
they
fulfill my mitzvah of buying a Sefer Torah by me putting. My
I would
little-
say you didn't have a hidur, you didn't have a hidur, but
If you were mishatif with someone to buy it together,
certainly you would.
I would
for
think
sure.
you
No, we're talking about when the people come and
When
they
the
say.
people come and say, hold my hand while I write
Yeah.
it.
What
is that?
That's a
But that doesn't accomplish anything.
Let's see what's in the
Yeah,
tzorfa.
right. So-
Let's see what's in the tzorfa.
Huh? What do you say?
I said let's see what's in the tzorfa. Let's just see what they
That's
say.
why they sell.
Let's see if that's
they sell
brought.
Psukim and they sell letters. If you buy one, then you are part of the thing.
Yeah, but you don't buy it sometimes. You know, they tell you.
That's
I went
right.
to one a few
According
weeks
to
ago,
this,
and they just-
so according to this, you participated in the mitzvah. Certainly, if you wrote a letter, you participated in the mitzvah. You're not the ikr and you're not the whatever, but you can't say that you were not messiah in the
Yeah, but you're
participation
not
of the
making
ksiva.
writing Sefer Torah.
No, I don't think nobody said that yet. We didn't say that you're Makai.
Okay.
According to the Sri Dayesh, if we accept the reason of the chinuch, that the mitzvah is designed to enable people to study Torah more easily, it should certainly be permissible to purchase a Sefer Torah as well or receive one as a gift, as he still achieves the same goal of having one available for the purpose of study. And even if one wishes to be machmir and fulfill the mitzvah properly, according to all opinions, so that even when purchasing the Sefer Torah, one can have the sofer omit a few words at the end and allow the purchaser to help fill in those missing words. This suggestion is mentioned by the Aruch HaShulchan, right? He passed away in 1910. He was the major balabatish, I would say, the balabatish people Balabatim studied halacha through before the Mishnah Brura. It was the Aruch HaShulchan that people had in their homes. And the Mishnah Brura basically replaced the Aruch HaShulchan. So the Aruch HaShulchan is widely practiced in many communities today, where the last few words are filled in during the ceremony known as Achnasa Sefer Torah, when the Torah is completed and brought to the shul with a large celebration, when commissioning Sefer Torah to be written. Let's see the Aruch HaShulchan. Uv'tosfos kosfu, im higia os achas b'Sefer Torah shalokach ben hashuk. So if a person who bought a Sefer Torah from the market, or rented a soifer, rented a soifer, or commissioned a soifer to write one, lo nechshav oid kechoytev mitzvah. If you added words by yourself, it's not like you chapped a mitzvah. Shaita etzel chaver ba'veira. Shahaya masha sefer she'ena muget. It's no longer considered chapping a mitzvah, like Nati said, as another had it in sin, as he was leaving it as an unedited work, and we treat him as if he wrote it. So you see, they are referring to this sugya of chatifas mitzvahs, no question about it. So ad kan lashona, that's the Tosfos. Comes out, says the Aruch HaShulchan, that by buying a Sefer Torah, you're mekayim the mitzvah. It's a hidur in the mitzvah. You accomplished it in a better fashion. It's not that you were not mekayim it. You can buy a Sefer Torah from another person to be mekayim this mitzvah.
It's like mitzvah bo yosem b'shlucha.
Yeah, Erachanami, that's a hidur. Now, based on so we're on page 192.
No, I have the Ramah here. It's not the exact words, but it does. He does say over here in the Ramah.
You're in Ayin Reish?
Yeah. Sachar lo sofer echto lo sefer Torah. O shekan o v'hu hayamuta v'higio. Harazek yilu chsavo.
Yeah, that's
So Kano. So you see, the Ramah does talk about buying it.
yeah.
It's not just soicher. Yeah. Okay.
Exact word.
Okay.
By the way, Rav Shapira, the chief rabbi of Israel, my Rosh Hashiva, told me a couple of times that the Aruch HaShulchan is the right sefer for kehilos.
Because he was a bala. Because
for rabbanim to paskin halacha to community. He said that the Mishnah Brura is for yeshiva bochrim.
And for tzaddik, he was a tzaddik.
And yes.
Because it's more machmir.
It's more concise also.
It's more the Mishnah Brura is more machmir.
Yeah.
And then the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan, there are many kulas. That it's more suitable to
Yeah, balabatim. That's what the balabatim. Of course. The Aruch HaShulchan also was on all Daled Chelkei Shulchan Aruch. The Mishnah Brura is only in Orach Chaim. So to help learn your Deya and other things, Aruch HaShulchan was key.
One sugya that I see it clearly, and Boirer.
You mean by the chumras of the Mishnah Brura?
Boirer, it's so complicated. It's such a complicated thing. And the Aruch HaShulchan Paskin, there is Boirer only in food.
Right, not by clothing.
Not by clothing,
Yeah.
And
books,
think
right.
about clothing and books, it's so complicated.
You can't do anything.
You can't do anything.
Right.
You can't do anything. And
No, it was fair. The
Boirer
Aruch HaShulchan, Tzvika has the Aruch HaShulchan was mamish for balabatim, and they consider the Mishnah Brura, the Chofetz Chaim, was a tzaddik. So it's a little bit what Nati is getting at. Now, based on what we have previously seen, it would seem that the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah is one that very few people actually fulfill in our time. Most people do not know how to write a Sefer Torah themselves, and even hiring a sofer to do it is extremely expensive. In addition, most people do not use a Sefer Torah in their own private homes for personal study, which was the reason given by the Sefer HaChinuch for the mitzvah. If so, is there a way for the majority of people to fulfill this important mitzvah today? The Rosh gave us a big chiddush in this area, in Hilchos Sefer Torah Menachos. He says, Avala Idna, today, the Rosh lived in Toledo, in Spain. I remember we explained that he was a student of the Marami Rottenberg, who lived in Germany, and when they captured Marami Rottenberg, it was bad times for the Jews there. The Rosh fled to Spain. He was an Ashkenaz, but he became the Posek Ador there in Toledo, and his son, Rav Yaakov Ben HaRosh, wrote the tour in Spain. So just to picture where the Rosh fits in. It says like this. Already in the Rosh's time, it was not the practice for individual private people to have a Sefer Torah in his home, i.e., Sefer Torah were written and placed in shuls to be read by the tzibur. The Rosh is saying it as if it's a change. Ve'a'idna, and now that means because he's commenting on the Chinuch who talked about writing a Sefer Torah privately. So because the Chinuch lived 100 years, maybe 150 years before the Rosh. So you're seeing already in the time of the Rosh it's changed. But mitzvah sasehi al kol ish Yisrael asher yodo masekas lichtov chumshei Torah. But there's a mitzvah saseh for every Jew to write the Torah, u'mishnah, u'gemara, u'perushim, la'agos b'en huvno. He says we should write chumashim, and we should write gemaras and perushim for him and his sons. So he's now expanding the mitzvah of Torah, of writing Torah, not just to write a scroll of a Sefer Torah, but to just have chumashim and other svarim.
Not just Torah Shebiksav.
Ki mitzvahs ksivas haTorah hu lilmod ba. Ki dichsiv v'lamdas b'Yisrael sima b'fiyam. He's quoting the pasuk. He doesn't say write the Sefer Torah. The Torah gave us the reason why we're doing it, so that you should put it in the mouths of the people. Those are in fact the books today that we should be writing. And you should not sell a sefer except for two reasons: either to be able to sustain yourself to study Torah, or for a shidduch. So according to the Rosh, it means it's almost like you may not sell a Sefer Torah. So your Sforim you shouldn't sell. You have to have a reason to sell your Sforim. So according to the Rosh, the basis for the mitzvah is to study with it. Therefore, since nowadays we use Sforim such as a Chumash, Gemara, or commentaries for learning Torah, the mitzvah today should be to write or buy those types of Sforim and keep them in one's homes. Let me go back. We already said that when it comes to Ksiva Sefer Torah, we could we don't have to just write it, we could buy one. And we even had a shita that said you could buy it and not even add any words to it. According to the Gra, you fulfill the mitzvah. The Rosh has now expanded it very easily for us. He says, anytime we buy a Sefer, we're makayim the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. And as we build our libraries, you're having a Ksiva Sefer Torah. Now, many Rishonim do not, including the Rambam, do not appear to subscribe to this Chiddush. But the Shulchan Aruch quotes this approach of the Rosh.
Why would Rambam not approve? Why would not?
So Shulchan Aruch says, "Ha'idna mitzvah lichtov chumshei Torah u'mishnah u'gemor perusheim v'lo yimachram and lo limator v'lisaisha." So he's quoting the Rosh. So even if we accept the approach of the Rosh, it's still unclear whether the mitzvah today has been extended to include both writing other Sforim as well as writing a Sefer Torah, or has been transformed into writing other Sforim alone, while writing a Sefer Torah no longer fulfills the mitzvah. So this question is disputed by the great Achronim. The Taz, right, who's the major commentary on the Yoredeya, the Shach and the Taz, cites both sides and concludes that the original mitzvah of writing an actual Sefer Torah is still in effect, which is the position of the Beis Yosef, right, Rav Yosef Karo's commentary on the Tur. Right? The Taz says, Ha'idna, v'chein kosav ha'Tur b'shem ha'Rosh, u'pirish Beis Yosef, right? Rav Yosef Karo commentary on the Tur says, the lo balif Torah so meksiva Sefer Torah. Don't use the kula of the Rosh as a means of how you can get out of the mitzvah of Sefer Torah. No. The Adarabah, yesh gam lanu lichtov v'lilmod ba. You have to write a Sefer Torah and learn from it. Ela baloi ma sheyesh mitzvah gam b'ksiva sforim elu. There is a mitzvah that you're makayim to write those forms. It's not that the mitzvah of ksiva Sefer Torah goes away. But ubidrisha choylek alav. So the drisha and the prisha are also other commentaries on the Tur. They argued with the Beis Yosef regarding that issue. But Mikol Makom says the Taz, Nechonim divrei Beis Yosef, deheich niftal mitzvah sasei shel v'atakis v'lachem b'chiluf hadoros. How could it be that just as the generation go on, all of a sudden the mitzvah of atakisvu is going to disappear? They were concerned that maybe the Rosh is saying, we don't have the mitzvah of ksiva Sefer Torah the way Achnos Sefer Torahs do. So the Taz is saying it doesn't go away. However, the Shach rules, with the opinion of the Drisha, that nowadays, one fulfills the mitzvah through writing Sforim alone, and not through writing a Sefer Torah. When we say writing, it means buying and owning, because they're synonymous. Okay?
So when Rambam
we didn't quote the
mentions
Rambam, but the Rambam didn't hold like the Rosh. He
No.
felt that you had to write a Sefer Torah.
Yeah, that's why he included when the final mitzvah, the 613 mitzvah, the final one
Yes.
is the writing the Torah,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So he meant writing.
No,
a
that's
Torah.
you read with the Chinuch. The Chinuch is not the Rambam.
I have
We
an-
quoted the Sefer Chinuch. We didn't quote the Rambam tonight.
Oh, okay, but
I have
When he said the Taryag mitzvah, that's the Chinuch. The Sefer Chinuch, his book follows every mitzvah in the Torah. So he
Yeah.
says the first mitzvah, the second mitzvah, the third mitzvah. The Taryag mitzvah is Ksiva Sefer
Right,
Torah.
right.
But that's the Chinuch. That's not the Rambam.
But
They
the
just
Rambam, his mitzvah, when he put that, he included the signature. He meant that
Yeah,
you have to.
the
write
Rambam holds a
Sefer
Ksiva Sefer Torah. It's got to be a Sefer Torah, not this
Right.
cool of the Rosh.
I have a little bit of a right to the Rosh. The fact that Melech has a special mitzvah to write himself a Sefer Torah.
Okay,
It's written you have to
right.
write.
He has to one that Yoitze v'Nichnas, one at home, one that goes out with.
So if you see that the Torah bother themselves to write a special chiyuv on
The Melech.
so it means that the chiyuv, the general chiyuv, it's a different thing. Because otherwise, the Melech has the same obligation as
Which
every
he
human
does,
being.
but he does.
What's the story? Why you need to add specific commandments?
Okay, so what's the raya? So what's the raya?
So you see that those commandments are two different things. So can be to support the Rosh that the command of written, it's not just written, it's the for the sake of Talmud Torah. And if it's for the sake of Talmud Torah, it's not just to written the
Sefer Torah. A Sefer Torah could be
it's-
anything.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe.
Says the Shach, quoting the
Well,
pre.
The reason why I mentioned the Melech has to have it, because it's saying that even he has to have it. Just because he's a Melech. A lot of things, halachas, a Melech could
But he's a
take away
Jew. He's a
property,
Jew.
could steal,
He's
do
a
anything
Jew.
he
Why
wants.
is a Jew? He doesn't need to put tefillin. You have a melech has to
But
put
sometimes
tefillin.
Melech doesn't have to fulfill every single halacha.
Melech
and
has to
most-
put tefillin. Melech has to say Kiryat Shema, and Melech has to have a Sefer Torah. And
True.
the fact,
True.
so why? So you
There's a
see that there is a
Yeah.
different.
So the
different-
first one is like all other Jews, and the one is the din of the Melech. Now, so says the Shach in fighting the Taz, because of Aprisha Nira, he says the Rosh says today's mitzvah is writing this and not a Sefer Torah. Major machlokas achronim here as to what's going on regarding this mitzvah. So another question dealt with in the commentaries: are women obligated in this mitzvah? According to the Sefer HaChinuch, the mitzvah applies only to men, since the primary obligation of Talmud Torah applies primarily to men. The Noheges B'chol says the Sefer HaChinuch in mitzvah Taryag. The Noheges B'chol Mokum B'chol Zman B'schorin, only males. Shein Chayavim B'Talmud Torah K'mo Kein Lichtov Osa V'lo Hanekeves. By contrast, the Shagas Aryeh. Shagas Aryeh lived, as you can see, 1695 to 1785. There's a nice biography of the Shagas Aryeh. That Shagas Aryeh was one of the first major pilpul, Harif, Rosh Yeshiva types who really started to analyze Torah, which eventually, Reb Chaim Volozhin and of course Reb Chaim Soloveitchik in the next 100 years expanded dramatically. So the Shagas Aryeh rules that the mitzvah applies to women. He argues that women are still obligated to study regarding to the practical halachas and issue of faith, so they also need to have a Sefer Torah.
Did you ever
Therefore,
hear
they
of a
too
woman-
must ensure they have accessible Sforim at home.
Did you ever hear of a woman giving a Sefer Torah? Never. Have you? Never heard of a woman giving a Sefer Torah.
So the Zutema, let's just read the Shagas Aryeh. Minayin lozos. Where did the Chinuch get this that women are not obligated? Vafilu shamash melachur medivra rosh. Dikar mitzvahs ksiva sefer Torah hu mishum k'dei lilmod ba. Right, like the Rosh said, the main purpose is so we can study. Mokesh kasavnu lekam nebesimen shachar zemikol makom hakasvu rebusa denoshim varchos birchas haTorah. We've already said that in the birchas hashachar, women are required to recite the birchas haTorah. Why? Hoil v'chayavis lilmod mitzvahs hanoeges behen. There have a chiyuv to study kashrus, taras hamishpacha, all the laws that apply to them. Imkei chanami, ein lanu tam liftor sanoshim mitzvah zuf ksiva sefer Torah. The kol shekem lamasha kasavti sham the ein mitzvah ksiva sefer Torah totally klab the mitzvah Talmud Torah. He had a different sort of why. So
I I like this Shagas Aryeh,
Yeah.
but you know, a woman cannot technically write a Sefer Torah because she's possible to be a sofer. So, how?
But she doesn't have to be a sofer, she can buy it.
The Rama said that you have to be Megia, you have to write a letter.
He did. But the Gra then commented and said, even if you don't
So-
write a letter, you're
so
Makayim
Shagas
fully.
Aryeh can be explained only according to the
But
Gra.
no,
not
but
according to the Rama.
now, but not just the Gra. As we learned, the Aruch HaShulchan says we all the Srida Esher Ulam Askamas Aposkim Hu Delo Karamo Elishiyot Mitzvah Sefer Gam B'Kniya, and you don't have to write anything. V'chein Echli Gra. So it seems like the majority of the poskim hold today that you can be yoitza with Kniya Sefer Torah. So a woman doesn't the fact that she, like Nati said, it has a problem with in this being able to write it. She could be yoitza through purchase. Okay. Do we have more time? No. Okay. So we'll start mitzvahs gerus.
Oh, that's good.